Web Mountain Technologies RUC-02. This video is a quick start guide to installing the RUC-02, the Remote Universal Controller. First thing to do is unpack the box, and in the box you will find the RUC-02 unit itself, which is that black box there in the middle towards the upper right. And you'll also see a power supply in the box. That's the little black unit at the bottom, has the cord coming out of it that's plugged into the front of the RUC-02 unit. You will need to provide your own serial PIM unless you've bought our kit that includes the serial PIM, and you'll need to provide your own Ethernet patch cable, as we don't know how long of a patch cable you'll need for your installation. Notice how these are connected. We'll talk about this in great detail in a minute. But the important thing here to notice is where the serial PIM is plugged in. Notice the serial cable connected to that, and it's going into the DB9 connector at the middle of the left side of the RUC-02 unit. Alright, in order to connect the cables to the unit, you want to do them in the following sequence. First, plug in the Ethernet cable into the front panel jack, and then connect the other side of your Ethernet patch cable into your router or your Ethernet switch. It's very important to have this connected before you power up the unit. If you don't do this, it's possible you could experience delays in being able to connect for remote access. Secondly, connect the serial PIM using the supplied serial cable to COM1 on the RUC-2. COM1 is that middle DB9 connector that I talked about just a minute ago on the picture. Don't plug it into the DB9 closest to the front panel. That's COM2. On the other end of the serial cable, connect that to the serial PIM itself, and then plug the serial PIM into a wall outlet for power. That's how we transmit UPB signals onto the power line, is with the serial PIM plugged in. And the serial PIM must be connected in order to be able to control UPB devices from the RUC-2. Now plug in the wall wart power supply as the last function. Connect that into the front jack as shown on that power slide, and then plug the wall wart into a wall outlet for power. Once power is applied, watch the LEDs on the front of the unit. Just to the right of the Ethernet jack is a small slot where there are 4 blue LEDs. When it first starts up, you'll see these blue LEDs flashing in a very random pattern. After a few seconds, it'll drop down to 1 or 2 flashing, and the randomness will start, or the flashing will start slowing down. Also pay attention to the LEDs on the side of the Ethernet jack. The LED on the left side will be a yellow LED, and it should be on solid if it's got connection to your local area network. If that LED is dark, then you don't have connection. You need to check your cables and check your router, however it's connected. Assuming that's connected properly, the LED on the right side is a green LED, and it will flash based on receiving Ethernet traffic. So once those LEDs are up and working, the unit is up and powered, and we're ready to take the next step. Okay, now we're ready to access the user interface on the RUC-02. In order to do that, the first thing you're going to do is open up a browser on your PC, and you're going to type into the address bar www.wmtremote.com:port number, where port number is the remote access port on your RUC-02. You'll find this information on the label on the bottom of the unit. It'll be a 5-digit code that says remote access, or it'll be on the index card that was taped to your unit when you pulled it out of the box. That index card has the port number as the very first item, then the serial number, and then the user WMT RUC, the user admin with their passwords. So once you enter that in and click go, you should be challenged for username and password. Go ahead and use the admin user, no quote marks. Just type in admin, A-D-M-I-N, all lowercase, and then type in the password that's to the right of the admin user on the index card that we provided you. This can be a little confusing. There are some characters that cause issues. For example, a capital O versus a number look very similar to each other. If you have any problems and you keep getting a message that the serial number doesn't work, call us or email us and we'll help you out. We did create these passwords by design to be very challenging and complicated, all in order to improve security of the device. On some occasions, some users have had issues connecting to the RUC02 using the remote access port. If that happens to you, then it gets a little bit more complicated, and we'll need to find the IP address of the RUC02 on your local network. This IP address will look like 192.168.1.14 or 10.0.1.58. To find that, there are a couple of options. First off, go to your router. If you can access the user interface on the router, most routers will have a page that will show all devices connected to the local area network that they're managing. Look for a device with a host name of WMT RUC or a manufacturer's name of Texas Instruments. Texas Instruments being the manufacturer of the processor that we're using in the RUC02. If you find that, it should be associated with an IP address. Write down that IP address. Okay, if that doesn't work, or if you can't get into your router, then you'll need to download an application to PC, an application of a type called IP Scanner. The one we like is called Advanced IP Scanner, and we give you the URL right here, www.advanced-ip-scanner.com. You go to that website, download the application, install it, and then run it. And when you run it, it will come back with a list of all devices on your network, showing again the host name and the MAC address and the manufacturer's name. Look for WMT RUC, look for Texas Instruments as the manufacturer, and if neither one of those show up, you might look in the MAC address, and that MAC address will match the serial number that's on the index card or on the back of the RUC unit itself. So assuming you do that and you find the local IP address, now armed with that local IP address, go back into your browser, and rather than typing in the remote access address, type in http://local IP address, or as an example, http://192.168.1.14. And then you should see the username and password challenge and go ahead and log in. Okay, however you got to the user interface, you're now logged in. Great work. Let's go ahead and explore the RUC2 user interface. Okay, once you get logged in, this is an example of what you're going to see on the RUC user interface. You'll be taken to the home page. Several things to notice here. First, you'll see that serial number, the same one that was on the index card and on the back of the RUC2 unit. And that is the MAC address of the unit itself. You'll see the firmware version and database version. That's how we can determine if you need to have a software update done on a unit at some point in time. You'll see the current date and time, sunrise, sunset. We'll come back to those in a minute. You can change some other settings, most notably the WMT RUC password from here if you want. For support, Contact is intended mainly for professional installers working with clients. That way their client could log into this, see this, and know who they would call for help. Now on the left-hand menu, click on Network and Config. Again, you'll see the MAC address. Here you can change the host name if you would like. Most people don't, and there's really no reason to do it, but if you want to do it, you can. We do recommend leaving enabled DHCP enabled as the check mark is shown here, rather than going with a fixed IP address, mainly because if you ever replace your router or change networks, the unit will come right back up with practically no input. All you'd have to do is find the new IP address. If you leave it at a fixed address, somewhere or another, you'll have to get it back to DHCP enabled in order to bring it up on a new network. It can be done, it's just more complicated. Now, notice the local IP address, the 10.0.0.137. That's the one we were talking about earlier. And that's how you would access the browser from the local network, using the browser from the local network. The gateway is the IP address of your router typically, and the subnet mask is almost always 255.255.255.0. You can't change any of these settings if you're still in DHCP. If you go to fixed addressing and disable DHCP, then these can be modified. Now, here is where we might have an issue. Go to the primary and secondary DNS fields. This is an example of how it should look. These are DNS servers supplied by the DHCP capability of my router. However, some routers don't play nice, and there might be gibberish in these two fields. If so, you need to do this. At that point, you will have to go back and uncheck the Enable DHCP box and go into fixed addressing. You can leave the IP address, gateway, and subnet mask as they are. However, for DNS, replace the entries in those two fields with, for primary, use 8.8.8.8, and for secondary, use 8.8.4.4. Those are Google DNS servers, and it will correct this issue. Remember, if I mentioned earlier, if you had problems being able to access the unit using the remote access method early on, this is why that was occurring. We didn't have good DNS servers to refer to. So this will fix the remote access problems that you were having earlier by going to these Google DNS servers. Notice at the bottom of this page the remote access ports. Those can't be changed, but they're there for information purposes. But notice the remote web port. That's the same 5-digit code that showed up on your index card on the back of the unit and how you access the unit remotely. Don't worry about the others. We'll talk about them, the 9761, 9762, when we get into the video on using Upstart with the RUC. If you made any changes, click on the Save Config button there in the middle of the page. However, when you do that, that's going to cause a reboot on the unit, so give it a couple minutes to boot up before you come back into it, the user interface. Okay, if you had to do that, or if you didn't, go ahead now and click on Device Config on the left-hand menu. Ignore the serial port 1 and port 2 down at the bottom. Those are for information purposes only. Someday we'll allow the serial ports to do more than UPB, but right now they're fixed at UPB. So that's just really for information purposes and nothing else. However, the general setup up at the top needs to be completed. So first, we recommend going to www.zipinfo.com, enter your zip code, and select latitude, longitude. With those new numbers, enter those new values into these fields, then select your time zone from the drop-down, and you can see all the various time zones that are there. Then select your time zone, and then go to the very bottom of the page and click on Save Config. Now, most people won't need to change the DST, always leave it enabled. There are a couple of spots in the US that don't observe daylight savings time, and they would need to change this, but the majority of you just always leave DST enabled. Okay, once you click on Save Config, that will cause a reboot again, and so wait and give the unit a couple minutes to get through that process, and then go ahead and get back into the user interface. Do you recall that I said earlier we'd come back to the times on the home page at a later point? When you initially accessed the unit and looked at the home page, the current date and time were probably incorrect, and the sunrise-sunset times were incorrect. These were also incorrect on the device configuration page. Now that you've done this setup on this page and clicked on Save the Config, those will all be correct, and you should be seeing correct time dates and sunrise-sunset times. A quick comment about time. The RUC 2 does not have an internal clock. It acquires its time from the internet. If the unit does not have a connection to the internet when it powers up, the time base will be wrong. If it powers up and gets a good time base, then loses the internet, it will maintain the time unless the RUC loses power and it has no internet. Then the time will be off. Okay, now click on the admin menu. By the way, you must be logged in as admin, the admin user, in order to access this page. If you logged in as the WMT RUC user, you can't get into the admin page. Remember earlier I said that you could change the WMT RUC user password from the home page? Well, you can change the admin user password from this page. However, while we know these are difficult passwords, we don't recommend changing them for 3 reasons. First, if you ever need to reset the unit, the passwords will revert to those original passwords. Second, these are difficult passwords for a reason. They make it more challenging for a hacker to break into the unit. Everything can be broken into with enough effort. We just want to make a hacker decide to go look for easier targets. And there are, believe me, there are many more easier targets than this. Third, and this is somewhat controversial and is up to you, if you change the password, we can't log in and help you remotely. We have a stored record of all the unique original passwords. If you don't want me to be able to access your unit, then by all means go ahead and change the password. Otherwise, if you don't mind me changing or accessing your unit, and we will only do that when you ask for help, then leave them as they are. Continuing with the admin page. Owner-installer contact information isn't used anywhere, with the exception that the installer info is displayed on the home page under that one field for support contact. Next, we see the section to change the remote access. This is pretty important. There are 4 options here, and let me show you those. You can have no remote access at all, only web browser access. COM ports are always open, or COM ports are only open for 2 hours. If you select no remote access, then you won't be able to use www.wmtremote.com for remote access to be able to access your unit from wherever you wanted to access it. You could still do remote access, but in order to do that, you'd have to open up a port in your firewall and do the old method of remote access. The disadvantage with that is now you've got an open port on your network, which is a target for a hacker at that point. The second option is the default option and how the unit ships. You can only access the unit's user interface through your browser. You can't access the COM ports. The last 2 options are for remote upstart use. I won't go into this in great detail right now. We'll talk about this more when we do the RUC and upstart video. However, a quick comment, upstart has no password protection, so we don't recommend option 3, which leaves the remote upstart port open, but we do recommend option 4, which only opens that port for 2 hours, then it automatically closes the port on its own. This is just in case you forget to manually close the port when you're done with doing the work you want to do with upstart. Okay, be careful with the next option. This completely resets the unit back to how it left the factory. Back to original passwords. You'll lose all settings and configuration, and it'll remove all triggers that you've set up. The option's there if it's ever needed, but hopefully you won't need that. Reboot the RUC. We would prefer users to use this button rather than doing an abrupt pull the power plug to do a reset of the unit or repower the unit. An abrupt loss of power has a minor risk of losing settings or confusing the unit, but most of the time you'll just be fine doing that. But if the option's there, we prefer you use this button to reboot the unit. The last option on this page is providing a mechanism to update software. At the current time, if you need an update, contact me. Okay, momentarily click on the left menu items, UPB transmission, receive, triggers, control panel, export voice. We're going to discuss this in a later video, so I'm not going to take any time on these, but that way you just saw what the pages look like. Now go on to the backup and restore page. Backup backs up, just like it says, backs up all your settings, data, and passwords into a file that you save to your computer. We recommend creating and saving the backup file often if you make any changes. I would do it after I do the initial setup of the RUC. In the event that something happens that requires a factory reset, you'll have this backup file. Then you can select Restore from this page and get the RUC back to where you had it with minimal effort. Notice you have a couple of options when you restore concerning passwords and networking. Okay, that's how to do the initial setup and a brief run through in the menu. At this point, we would ask that you watch the next video in this series using the RUC 02 with Upstart. Thank you for your time and attention. Goodbye.